As of writing this, I have less than a week left before starting a new semester, and as of the publication of this thingy, the first quarter of 2019 will be over in less than a week as well. And so I wanted to take some time to write something a bit more laid back and with even less cohesion than what my normal entries have. This would be Afterlog. A quick rundown of some of the most outstanding pieces of entertainment that I consumed over the last 3 months or so. This has no correlation with how good or entertaining it was, but more like a mento of what I would want to remember going forward in life. The only rule I'll impose to myself is that I must have started the piece in question in the last 3 months. If I haven't gotten around to finishing something, I'll say so as well. Also, I'll try to organize it by mediums, but I can't really promise anything. Best buds. I can't remember in what context I found out about the band Mom Jeans, but they have one of the most welcoming albums and tracks I have experienced in my short foray into the meaning of music. They only have 2 short albums, this one and Puppy Love, each standing at a little more than half an hour. Between the two, this one felt much more cohesive with its inviting tones that contrast with some well-delivered vocals. It's got a certain 2000s vibe, with the use of catchy guitar melodies and heavy reliance on percussions, but at times it can feel very samey and the singer can sound bored during certain tracks. At its best, hearing this album can either feel like hearing a mixtape from a close friend that turns out to be very tender yet assertive in its intimacy, or like having a powerful heart-to-heart with someone that ends in tears mixing happiness and sadness. Examples of these two moods can be heard respectively in Movember, aided by Sarah Levi's refreshingly soft voice and a great change of mood by the middle of the song, and the opening track Death Cup, which I interpret as a deep talk with someone after a powerful final period, and it has the ability to tug any heartstrings at least just a bit. Lyric analysis ain't my forte though. Both of them are definitely the standout tracks, but Poor Boxer Shorts and Babe Nation deserve some recognition for just being accurate and keeping it real. Granted, the lyrics of the majority of the tracks can be interpreted as someone talking to their significant other, but with a title like Best Buds, I do think the themes of fraternal love between friends are consistent, and I really like this album for that reason. Fully Coolly Alternative. By at least trying to keep the theming of a melancholic piece, Fully Coolly Alternative comes around as one of the only anime I finished these last 3 months that has stuck long enough in my mind to write about it now. Fully Coolly Alternative, from here on just Alternative, would be the third season to 2000's cult classic Fully Coolly. Both of its sequels aired in 2018, with about half a year between the two, on Adult Swim. And while Fully Coolly Progressive got the attention and disappointment expected from a second season of an 18-year-old property, Alternative got a bit lost amidst the myriad of amazing anime that the fall season brought to the community by the end of 2018. Alternative stars high school senior Kana and her 3 best friends as they start to think about their new adult life while trying to leave their immature selves behind. However, Kana is a bit reluctant to her growing up and changing her comfy, blissfully ignorant non-adult life. That's when recurring character of the 3 seasons, Haruko, appears and craziness ensues. Except not this time. You see, social consensus says that Alternative is the least fully coolly of the 3 seasons because it lacks the spectacle and extravagancy of the first season, as well as the flair and low-LXD randomness of the second one. Alternative is much more grounded in reality, which in turn means that there is less bombastic scenes and set pieces. Those showy moments are there, but in a minor degree to elevate the message of growing up and accepting change and to contrast the original's message of living the most out of your time. In a sense, it's as if the first season was wilder and cartoonier because it was seen from the eyes of child protagonist Naoda, despite his efforts to grow up, while Alternative is mostly realistic because it is seen through the eyes of Kana, where we do see some trademark Fully Coolly strangeness because she still wants to hold on to her childhood and teenage years. It's a powerful message that is beautifully complemented by some decent character development, some hard-hitting truths about friendships, growing up, and the relation between both these themes, stable animation, great character design, and good scenarios, and finally some amazing tunes by the Pillows as they make the best tracks from the OST, those that everybody needs to experience, maybe even more than Alternative itself. Hilda. Series are not my go-to medium to experience some good narratives. However, I've seen enough people talk about this cute looking animated series and it had been sitting in my recommended feed on Netflix for a while. Hilda ended up being a wholesome story about, well, the titular Hilda, as she moves from the countryside to the city and is forced to leave all her supernatural friends and comfort zone in favor of urban and school life. The greatest thing about the story is the setting. Mystical creatures living in the same world as urban modern day human civilization is not usually seen in any story unless humans are completely or partially unaware of their existence. In Hilda, the people of Trollberg, the creative name of the main city, know about supernatural stuff like trolls, spirits, ghosts, etc., while also being completely understanding if someone tells them that elves, maras, or a conglomerate of rats that love to gossip exist. It is so refreshing after so many stories about hiding something mythical from the public eye, and even more so than stories about getting transported to a world that has those elements. The characters themselves are pretty nice too. Of course, Hilda's progressive acceptance of urban life is the highlight, but her two friends, Fred and David, also have an interesting confrontation with accepting their own bad traits. Also, characters like Hilda's mom and Alfor are just a delight to witness in how well their personalities contrast with Hilda's and what roles they play in certain plot points. Finally, the presentation is one of the most fitting in this whole list. Its pastel colors give some feeling of childlike wonder to the world as we see it through Hilda, and the synths used in the soundtrack make for a more immersive experience in certain episodes. Overall, Hilda's just a beautifully crafted cute story that I would certainly show to my eventual children, and I would gladly experience it all over again with them. A Star is Born. I always find myself getting more engrossed in the world of cinema as February comes around for obvious reasons. I really like what award shows do to the medium commemorated, as everyone goes in head on to a fully dynamic discussion about who should win, who will win, and so much more. I already gave my 2 cents about awards a month ago, but I haven't really spoken about my experience with the movies themselves. A Star is Born is my personal favorite of the 8 nominated for Best Picture this past ceremony. It's about a young, talented singer, Ali, who gets flown into stardom due to her new relationship with alcoholic country singer Jack. At first, I feared that there were way too many processes to keep track of, that the movie might have lost itself. However, the romance felt earned and authentic from a writing and acting standpoint. The themes of celebrity life were very light, although it never was such of a focus in the story and development of Ali as in, say, Bohemian Rhapsody. And while certain conflicts did feel like they came out of nowhere, it did help to highlight the overarching theme of love and self-care. But the biggest takeaway from this movie, and what made it my favorite among the 8 Best Picture nominees, was how it treated its themes of drug addiction, redemption, and overall care for others in a respectable way. The only other movie to come close to handling those themes as the focus of the story and did it in a fascinating way was probably Boyhood back in 2014, that I know of, but it got overshadowed by its own, oh look, we made this movie throughout 12 years, as felt present all along its runtime. In here though, these themes of shame, addiction, self-care, and such truly feel like the column of the whole movie as it permeates the entirety of the production, from scene composition, acting, editing, sound design, and of course music, shadow to shadow. This movie is such about a couple of musicians finding love between themselves as it is about them finding love to replace the one that they don't have for themselves. And it shows the audience the importance of self-care without being preachy or hyperbolic. Spiderman Into the Spiderverse. And from my favorite between the Best Picture nominees, we go to my favorite in the whole Academy Awards, if not my favorite nominee from all awards season. I still like Dirty Computer and Greatman more though. Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse is a story about Spider-Man as it at work alongside Spider-Man to save the multiverse from collapsing in on itself. It makes no sense describing it as it is, but if you had close to zero experience with the Spider-Man franchise as I had myself when I saw the movie, seeing it blindly is definitely the best option. Rest assured that the story is very well made with enough stakes to keep it interesting, well-crafted character development, and an overall feeling that the status quo is meant to be broken. Character dynamics are the heart of the story and are accompanied by some stellar character design choices that are just a delight to see in action. All of this is backed up by an amazing soundtrack that goes along so well with the urban setting, and it even has soundtracks with narrative intentions, which is always a plus. But nothing about this movie is as important as its animation. It uses a 2.5D effect alongside some strategically well placed filters to achieve this comic book style of animation. It also manages to break animation conventions like the lack of stretching in the actions of the characters, which makes some snappy and precise movements seem more quick and precise. This movie actively tries to push the medium of animation forward, and the only thing it got was an Oscar for Best Animated Feature. As a certain pig in a movie once said, you got a problem with cartoons? Uzumaki. Getting into manga was harder than what I expected it to be. Just because either I knew most of the stories already because of anime adaptations, or the length of a manga series were too long or continuing. But then, Junji Ito happened. I ended up reading his most known long work and have now an irrational fear towards spiral patterns. Get Dreamcasts away from me. Uzumaki is the story about the small town of Kuroscho and how certain strange events concerning spiral patterns have been happening and even affecting the well-being of the residents. We see the slow turning of the small town into a this-year version of hell through the eyes of Kirie Goshim, daughter of one of the town's spotters, as she is conveniently placed close enough to the action to get her soul out of her body due to the fear as much times as chapters there in the story, but far enough to be out of harm's way. Usually. Besides some obvious manga and comic resources like the page turner as a way to make jump scare or the convenient placements of speech bubbles, the stark use of saturations, dark tones, in most key scenes and panoramic shots of Kurosho make the town feel as negatively charged and intimidating as it would feel for Kirie. The most entertaining part of the whole experience was seeing how the situations got more and more surreal as time moved on. Like for example, while it might be easy to imagine a situation with a creepy neighbor, even if obviously not at the extremes shown in the manga, it is harder to imagine your hair being turned against you, even more to imagine snail people being eaten by cannibals. However, this progression from easily understandable and relatable situations with a sprinkle of Ito madness up to the end situations make the reader feel like something like what happened in Kurosho is a very, very real possibility. Couple that with the hyper-realistic art style that it is known for, and with the development of certain characters, and you get the superpower to transmit any fear your characters could have to your readers, even if it is as benign as a spiral. Emergence, fuck no. I just, no. It's just that I've already spoken my mind about this in the manga the last entry. I would still talk about it in normal circumstances, but seeing as I still can't touch any part of my body without feeling like the worst living being in this corner of the universe, it's safe to say the situations aren't normal. But if you want a brief summary of my thoughts, a jaw-droppingly shocking story told masterfully by taking full advantage of the medium of adult content that is way too much not safe for work, if not life depending on who you are, to casually recommend without a huge, huge disclaimer. Everyone should experience this hentai, but I hope no one gets in an absolutely awful state of mind for more than a day for it. Smokers Only, better known as Solo para Fumadores. I'm planning on writing an entry about my country's contribution to modern human art, and I gotta say, we Peruvians don't have that much to boast in general. Besides Kino and Lamas, our best contribution to 21st century society were a show about ghost clowns and an ironically super self-sexualized ex-congresswoman. Nevertheless, we really stand out in traditional arts such as architecture, ceramics, paintings, textiles, and the one medium that stands between the traditional and modern, literature. Enter Julio Ramon Ribeiro, a fantastic storyteller with one of the most impressive writing skills in Peruvian literature. Throughout the 20th century, he published a whole bunch of well-crafted short stories that show the gritty reality of opportunism, classism, and racism in the country. Some of his short stories have become classics in Peruvian literature, and rightfully so. However, Smokers Only is a different beast, all on its own. While Ribeiro tends to create fictional characters and put them in realistic settings, this work serves almost as an autobiography, detailing the main character's relationship with cigarettes all throughout his life. Now, I don't use the word almost lightly, as it isn't explicit whether or not the main character is himself or just someone based on himself. That being said, the use of certain words more fitting in a deep and interpersonal conversation is entirely different to other times he writes in first person. He tends to write either very formal or very casually, but here Ribeiro is much more intimate. Also, most of the story beats are basically the same you would find in his actual biography, so it is safe to say that the main character is him. Ribeiro tells the reader about the image of tobacco in his childhood, his first interactions with it during his teenage years, and its role on his persona as a writer. Eventually, he writes about the connections and disconnections his addictions have caused, his dangerous experiences with the substance, and his overall reluctance to leave it. Suddenly, you find yourself on the last stretch of the story. The pacing of it is very fast, but it never feels like that is a hindrance. It really creates a profound intrigue on the reader throughout the building of a parasocial relationship in a way that really makes you wonder about the possibilities of literature. If you can find this short autobiography in a language you understand, you really should give it a go. Side note, I wrote this before actually finishing Smokers Only, and now that I finished it, yeah, it's basically an autobiography. It's not like an artistic decision, so yeah. Next one. 999. 9 hours, 9 persons, 9 doors. This is one of those visual novels that has multiple endings, and when I first played it back in mid 2018, I thought I just reached a certain point, the submarine for those who know, and got disappointed that that was all the game had to give. And so I realized how much of a doofus I was for not trying to actively get the true ending the first time when I replayed it a month ago. 999, 9 hours, 9 pesos, 9 doors, from here on just 999, is an escape the room game where 9 people are put inside a big ship that's sunk into the ocean, and the only way to escape is by using a quirky mathematical operation and going through a door marked with the number 9. Now that I am writing a brief summary, I realize just how much of the game's true story is hidden behind its many endings, and by the end of the two best written endings, it feels like you are playing an entirely different narrative. In turn, it never fails to entertain in this way. That being said, gameplay is another completely different story. The puzzles and escape room aspect of the game is really well crafted, but after playing the game 7 times in trying to get the true ending, you realize just how much times you can solve the same enigmas without getting bored. You might repeat the same room several times if you don't know what you're doing, and you won't know because the true ending is sitting very well enough to be this way. Despite all this, I do think it is worth the patience, draining experience just to see the story unravel and the characters show what they really are. Also, mad props for using the DS design to the favor of the narrative, in what seemed as a gimmick at the start but felt really stable when I gave it some thinking. Oh, and just what is with some of the things that happen at the end. What 99's story just keeps on giving, even well after finishing the game. But I'm over it now, mainly because I'm playing the sequel called The Virtuous Last Reward, and there's this cute pink-haired girl that is receiving all my attention right now. Return of the Obra Dinn, which I haven't finished yet. There is no medium where innovative ideas have as powerful an impact in an experience as gaming does. Expressing ideas through gameplay can make a big difference than just seeing it or hearing about it. Enter Return of the Obra Dinn, a fantastic mystery game set in the late 19th century, where the player controls a detective tasked to solve the mysteries of the death of all 60 people aboard the Obra Dinn. It does this by giving the player an object that lets the detective rewind time to hear the last conversation of any dead person and see a real life-size diorama of the moment that person lost his life. There are two big reasons why this game is so well crafted. First off, everything about the art direction accentuates the feeling of being aboard an 1800s ship. It's got some very enchanting visuals by mimicking those seen in old early 80s PC games that relied on wireframe visuals, which in turn gives some smooth fluidity to the subtle movements there on the ship. And the Overland itself was designed with the player's actions in mind. It procedurally opens up to reveal more and more of itself in a way that synergizes with the hint gathered in normal gameplay. For example, in one of the death flashbacks, you might see someone coming from a certain room, but you can't enter the room because that same someone is blocking the path. Eventually, you would have enough context to enter that room in present time, which in turn makes the whole story flow in a dynamic and interactive way. Which leads me to my second point, in that the game is very captivating in the sense that it's hard to pin down. Almost every correct hypothesis about the identity and the cause of death gives the player a rewarding feeling of eureka that can be very addictive, until you either get really stumped or guess the name of somebody and it feels rewarding. I now really understand why so many people call this game of the year 2018. Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon. Easily one of the most overlooked games of a recently popular franchise. Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon, from here on used FE11, depicts popular Super Smash Bros. Melee main rival character Marth in the first story he was part on back in the Nintendo Entertainment System, but now remade for the DS. In FE11, Marth, ex-Prince of Altea, goes around the continent of Arcania, recruiting people so he can take back his country from the evil empire known as Dollar, and his recently resurrected leader, the Shadow Dragon Medius. All these complicated names can be a bit disorienting for people like me unaccustomed to high fantasy at least, but are really only a fancy coding for a simple but effective story. Now, truth be told, while I love me some Fire Emblem gameplay, I really only played FE11 to get the gist of Marth's story and because I'm super new to the whole FE franchise. Granted, FE11 is widely agreed to be one of the worst entry points for the franchise, but I still liked it enough gameplay-wise to be excited to play other FE games that are known to be better than it. Basically, it only gets better. Another big contrast between my opinion and what is tend to be said about the game is that the characters seemed very appealing and were the highlight of my playthrough. Now, most of them are one-note characters, sure, with only a defining character trait and that's it. Close to zero character development, and even some plot points that come absolutely from nowhere. But it was still entertaining to see them interact between each other like it was an old bad kids show. Kaeda, Tiki, Merrick, and Navarre were definite standouts for me. Also, it was eye-opening to see these characters in action and finally understand reference in future game, not only with characters but with a bunch of other plot devices or general stuff like weapons and spells. As a Smash player, seeing Thoron, the original Falcon, the Living Sword, and even Marth himself in action was surreal. My experience with FE11 felt like going through a museum or something I've known existed for a while but never fully understood. I liked it, but it was boring enough times that I don't want to experience again. These next two had a bigger impact personally, and so need some context background about me. If you aren't interested in any of that, feel free to skip it if you want, even though I still recommend both of these examples of online video media. Yonaka Tea Time. Ah yes, the podcast that made me get enough motivation to get up and do something productive, even if that something is writing in a blog that nobody reads and making videos, just reading those blog entries. What? Yes. Anyway, Yonaka Tea Time is a podcast led by three cover singers in the Vocaloid scene, Jubiphonic, Rage, and Anthem. They reunite a day every month to talk about a topic that one of them has chosen. Since it is still a relatively new and small podcast, it doesn't have that many episodes, but the amount of interaction ability makes up for it as its Twitter is much more active than expected for a series that has a new episode every end of a month. The themes, as of now, have ranged from deep but important, like how it is okay to be passionate about something or how artists shouldn't dispose of their own well-being to try to make better content, to some topics that sound superfluous but might have some other more impactful ramifications in the life of a person, like gacha games, which is going to be the theme of the next episode coming late March 2019. The presentation between the two episodes is very consistent and relaxing. The one person that proposes a theme brings in a powerful presentation to it in its talk, and narrating personal stories about their struggles with the topic in question is encouraged between the three. They do have one common idea that permeates every discussion. Mental health is important. In the context of the first two episodes specifically, there is no problem whether you want to enjoy a hobby or profit from it, but you shouldn't feel bad for enjoying something just for the sake of enjoying it and being passionate. Under the same line of thought, there is no relationship between making good quality content and being depressed. If anything, that just worsens the whole production experience and lowers production ability. Personal experience time. By the time the first episode came out, I was in the middle of a productive crisis since I'm about to turn 19. Basically I felt pressured to continue to contribute to society in some way, shape or form, and not getting any of the 5 works I applied for didn't help in my mental stability. I know it ain't much, but I didn't know better. I already had the first entry for this blog published, but I was ready to throw this project alongside all of the other projects that didn't flourish, because there wasn't any motivation from my part, and getting my voice out in the internet still feels daunting. But seeing the first episode gave me that little push to at least repurpose a previous piece I wrote for one of the gigs that I didn't get. While it felt like cheating, putting something old in here, a part of me didn't really care. I liked the topic of how unnecessary it is to find a work that you like enough to excuse yourself from being passionate about a medium. Enough so that it felt nice getting my thoughts online. I also just realized how accurate the topic was to my situation. No, sure, even now it feels like screaming into a vacuum, writing a piece like this, or making a video like this, but I like it, and that is enough to warrant me doing this. Thank you to the three tea drinking divas behind Yonaka Tea Time for just giving me that little push I needed, even though I immediately fell because of it. This is the part where I talk about Reddit videos. You see, I enjoyed making these entries, but it still made me feel like time was passing way too fast and I'm wasting it by being sluggish, lazy, stupid, and unconcerned. Despite the fact that I'm about to become 19 years old, I have no work experience to back me up. Even though in my country you can work starting at 18, and instead of working, I was in college most of the time, it still felt like a year wasted by doing nothing. It didn't help that I found a new trend in YouTube that's as trashy as watching Vine or TikTok compilations, except it feels a bit different. Reddit videos are just someone reading comments or posts about a certain topic each video. Nothing more, nothing less. Low effort, at first glance at least. Easy to consume, and it turned me into the laziest of the laziest since if I wanted Reddit content I could just go to Reddit and read it. However, as Yonaka Tea Time taught me, in that motivation experience, there is no need to be ashamed of myself for liking something. So I decided to just watch them, and if the answer to why I like this content came to me or not, it wouldn't affect my enjoyment of it. And then it hit me. Personality. These content creators do more than just read these posts, of course. Or rather, in the action of reading them, they already add something to the experience of Reddit. For example, most of the content made by Story TV and r slash is only themselves reading posts, but narration is an art form, and such creates an entirely different experience. Also, what is being narrated in these videos doesn't need as much respect as, say, narrating a classic literature story, so as not to lose the point of the original work. Mainly because Reddit posts and content is much more simpler, way less artsy, and because they tend to stray away from subreddits like r slash no sleep or r slash out of my chest, which are much more serious. In other words, the content they narrate allow their work to be less like a way to know a story and much more like a conversation. It's much more casual, they can commentate, they can make jokes, they can be themselves. They add to something that is so simple, and their own online personas are part of the experience in Reddit videos. Maybe with these two, it isn't that apparent, but there's another way of doing these videos, in groups. On one side, Suit House, a conglomerate of British fellows, I commentate on different subreddits and other internet content. On the other side, just a group of very young YouTubers from all over the world that don't have a name as a group or aren't formally a group like Suit House, but appear very frequently in videos among their channels to not be a group. I'll call them the Discord group as they use that to communicate and get in touch with each other and their fans. Incomplete list of their channels in the description. Of course, both of these groups don't only make Reddit videos, especially each member of the Discord group since each of them has their own video making style and content, but it is the content that I find myself seeing more often. The thing about these group sessions of Reddit lurking is that it serves as a perfect display of their online personas slash personalities, which in turn entertains the audience. This is more apparent with the Discord group as most of them also stream in Twitch TV, which creates an almost unhealthily strong parasocial relationship. How's it working? Which actually makes them much more appealing as people. Reddit videos almost serve only as a platform for these online personas to coexist in a very entertaining and wholesome way. Wholesome isn't the word I'm searching for, but whatever. I put quotes around it. Yeah, that's it. These channels are really great, but it does reveal something about YouTube's relationship with its audience and vice versa. YouTube is trash, and so are we. No, they're good channels, so you go give them a watch. I think finishing the narration of my experience as a way to close this entry is the optimal way to, finish it. It was seeing these people have fun among themselves while also being very young what brought me back to that mindset of time running out. These kids are apparently enjoying what they are doing while also contributing to society in regards to entertainment. Well, I call them kids, but the youngest one is merely 8 months younger than me. However, I don't plan on letting that bum me down even more. I did say that I was starting a new semester in a couple of days, so I decided to keep up this blog as much as I can and to be better in self-care. I have ideas that I want to see to fruition, related to this blog or not, and that is enough to warrant me trying to make them true. Heck, like backing off what I'm reading right now, this recording was one of the things I wanted to do, like read all of my entries and put in a much more accessible format like YouTube. I'm doing it right now, which is something that I wouldn't have done before Yonaka Tea Time or watching the Discord group. Guys, it was an unmotivating side of me that I feel or hope that I'm, you know, burning down, which actually leads me to what I wrote next. To this potential first reader of this whole blog or YouTube video or whatever, and to any other person that comes afterward, I hope you understand how much your ideas and beliefs should matter to you. I mean, at times our minds will trick us into thinking that laziness can get us down a path like what the main character in Emergence went through, just without the drugs and sex, hopefully. But keeping in mind that some truly horrendous experiences like what Kiri Egoshima lived through are absolutely worse than that and are literally impossible in real life, should give us at least a bit of security. Reaching peak personal productivity isn't like we're trying to escape from a boat while being part of a death game. Heck, it isn't even such a gargantuan task as trying to solve 60 mysterious deaths. Or rather, it doesn't need to be. Perfectionism and expectations are the greatest enemy of personal goals, and it can be really taxing to make something as okay as Fire Emblem 11 is for the Fire Emblem franchise, when you wanted to make something as perfect and beyond as Spiderverse is for animation. If those feelings and thoughts are fucking you over, then go ahead and talk with someone that loves you as deep as Ali loves Jackson, or someone willing to just have an honest conversation with yourself in complete authenticity as depicted in Best Buds. And if you feel like there's no one willing to do that, which, by the way, you're wrong, there's always someone, or if you aren't willing to go through that, perfectly understandable, then just remember that while change will come sooner or later, eventually you will find comfort in that change, just as Hilda did. Now you might feel as pressured to grow up as Kana did, but losing perception of oneself or simplifying your personality to one defining trait, like what Sigurds were to Ribeiro, might feel peaceful at first, however it really doesn't sound safe. Just be passionate about yourself. You're the only topic that I'm certain you, the reader, viewer, whatever, are fully invested in, and no one has any right to tell you that you shouldn't care about it. About you. Be passionate about you. Yes, achieving goals in productivity can be daunting and a bit discouraging if we take into account that most of us aren't as lucky as the ones making Reddit videos. But if it only takes an afternoon of laughter on Reddit or somewhere else, with or without friends, to feel happy, then I doubt that the offer sounds bad. After all, by feeling happy, you would be taking care of yourself. I can't think of anything more productive than that. Whew, whoa, this ended up being much more preachy and deep than what I expected. Well, that's what I get for trying to tie together every piece of work I talked about here. I hope that you found something of value in this list of things I consumed during the last 3 months, and I didn't weirded you out by a sudden deep talk. Also, if you, the reader, viewer, whatever, are really there, I thank you so deeply for checking out this entry, blog, line, video, second, whatever you've seen of here. It really means the world to me. So, yeah, if that format sounded a bit weird, it's because I have a blog called Funny Napa where I write the scripts. I plan on doing videos of all of them, all of the entries eventually, just to like giving them a breath of fresh air and presenting them in a better format than just text. Uh, Again, if you liked something from the list or it seemed interesting, go ahead and experience it. I really recommend them, even if they aren't really that good. Thank you if you got here. Thank you for plowing through and just suffering through my badly Latino accent. And yeah, thanks for watching, I guess. I really should get a new microphone. I think the recording went out wrong. Whatever, it's not like anyone's hearing me. Huh.